taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance.
And happy Tuesday to you. It is Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. I'm thrilled that we're back for another episode of My Way this evening, conversations with entrepreneurs doing business outside the box. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I myself am an entrepreneur, and I've really enjoyed this series. You know, it's interesting because our main show, the Breakthrough Show, kind of went a different direction this season, and so I had so many entrepreneurs going, wait, what do you mean there's no room for me? What are you talking about? And so I said, well, what can I do? And so one of the things that always makes me really happy is to see how entrepreneurs are doing things new and different and aren't always following, you know, this is what you should be doing with your business. And listen, the truth of the matter is that when I envisioned this show, the first person that I thought of was Scott Mason. And I said, you know, if there's anybody that does things his way, it's Scott. And so I'm really excited to have him on tonight. He is an entrepreneur. He is a speaker. He is a coach. He was an attorney. Is there anything that he doesn't do? I don't know. We'll have to ask him that tonight. But he's been a guest on the Breakthrough Show. He's been a guest on Project Joy. Pretty soon he'll have been a guest on every show on the Breakthrough Show Network, and we wouldn't have it any other way. So without further ado, let's welcome the host of the Purpose Highway, Scott Mason, to the show. Scott, it's not early in the morning.
It's not early in the morning, but I got to say something. You said there's some things. Is there nothing that Scott Mason hasn't done? I'll tell you one thing that I haven't done.
Here we go.
I haven't been Jessica Dugas hosting the Breakthrough Show.
Very true. Very true. Very true. If you could morph into other people, there would be many more shows other than My Way that you could.
But none with quite the same level of love, I've got to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm really excited to have you here tonight because this is, you're, like I said, you're making the rounds here on the network and you're getting to experience the vibe of some of the different things. And really this show showcases how entrepreneurs are being themselves. And that's something that's not always easy for everybody. And I know that it wasn't always easy for you. We talked a little bit about that when you were on Project Joy. But for anybody that may be living under a rock, who have not been onto the show before, doesn't know who you are, tell everybody who you are, where you're joining from.
Thank you. First of all, I am joining from New York City. Yes, yes, yes. I'm bringing that vibe into the house, baby. So, just as you mentioned earlier, I am the myth slayer. I work with solopreneurs or entrepreneurs who are successful, or seasoned executives who are looking for maybe a more direct connection to purpose for either their business if they're a solopreneur or entrepreneur, or their career path if they are an executive. Maybe they're looking, if they've been in a large organization for a long time, to dip their toes into entrepreneurialism but don't know how. Or maybe they're simply looking, whether, like I said, a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, or an executive, to up-level their leadership. I work with them to dislodge toxic myths that are holding them back, to ignite the charisma within, and then find their own version of professional freedom. And I am privileged to be talking about it with you, Jessica Dugas.
I am privileged to be talking to you about it as well. And obviously, listen, you guys, some of the things that he mentioned about charisma and toxic myths and all of that, we had a whole series in the month of May with Scott every single Wednesday where you can literally, he breaks it down so beautifully for us. And so definitely recommend that you go check that out, because that's a great series to kind of get your toes wet a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Exactly, to begin to turn the first pages of that book of myths.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mentioned, you've done a lot of different things. So you started out, I don't know if you started out, but you were an attorney.
Yes.
At one point. Are you still licensed, or is that like severed completely?
No, I am still licensed. And let me tell y'all, those of you who are entrepreneurs, it's handy, because if people don't want to pay, or if they decide to screw around with you because they think you're some naive little entrepreneur,
How can we tap into that? How can those of us who do not have an attorney, we're not an attorney, how can we tap into that too?
Yeah. It is interesting, because a lot of being a successful attorney is, of course, understanding the law and knowing your rights, but it's also having the inner confidence to be able to project the fact that you are not someone that can just be rolled over. Now, you don't want to do that if it is a fellow entrepreneur or a business that is heart-centered, or is just looking to behave in a way that shows integrity or is completely reasonable. You don't want to pull it out those days. But having that confidence to stand up and say, I will find my remedies if you do not pay me. And yes, more than 120 days have passed, or you asked for XYZ, I gave you XYZ, and now you're threatening me. Well, confidence will help a lot of folks back away from that. And that's one thing that you don't have to be an attorney to be able to pull out of your pocket.
Yeah. I think that charisma portion that you talked about probably could be helpful as we tap into some of that confidence as well. But so you're an attorney, and you moved into this realm of speaking and coaching and all of that. Absolutely. Was that one of the things that we've talked about on this show, has been that sort of transition for people, and how a lot of times the outside folks can look in and go, Scott, what are you doing? Like, you're a successful attorney. What the hell are you thinking? So did you get that reaction? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah. Yes, I got that reaction, but I got some other reactions that surprised me. So I will never forget, I worked for a major social services government agency for a while, and they had a review of a reunion of people that worked there. And at that time, I was with that first entrepreneurial organization that I worked with after I left large org life. It was a printing company. And I remember telling people at that reunion that I co-owned a manufacturing enterprise, and people just sort of stopped and looked at me like they just had no idea what to say. Now, there was another time when I still owned that company, that a group of attorneys that did commercial law that I had known many years before had a Christmas party of everyone who had worked in that particular division of that organization held. And I was invited. And Jessica, I'll never forget it. I walked up to the apartment where this party was being held, and I was about to grab the door knob, and I could hear laughter inside and everyone having a good time, and presumably libations were flying around. And I hesitated. I was afraid that they would laugh at me. I was afraid that they would look at me and say, God, what a screw up. Well, obviously, you couldn't make it as a lawyer, or wow, what happened in your life that made you go down this particular route? And I was so scared I almost turned away, and full of almost like preemptive shame. But I took a deep breath. I turned that doorknob and I walked through. And right inside the door, there was a woman that I worked with like 15, 18 years before, and she was so warm, and I trusted her. And she gave me a hug, and she asked me what I was doing, and I told her. And I said, but I'm afraid to tell people here. And she said, Scott, let me tell you something. They're not going to look on you as a loser. You're not going to be any sort of social pariah. They're all going to be jealous of you because you did what they wanted to do and have wanted to do their whole lives. You're going to be the belle of the ball. Mm-hmm. And Jessica, I was.
Of course you were. Of course you were. It's one of those things where I think, and this has been brought up in other instances before on this show and others, that, that response that we get with people, as much as we internalize it sometimes, it's not about us. It's about that jealousy sometimes and the misunderstanding and a lot of different things, wouldn't you say?
Totally. There was this group called Mel and Kim that was popular in the 80s. Well, at least popular with Scott Mason. I don't know that anyone else liked it, but I did. And they had this song where the first line of it really spoke to me. It said, I don't want to live on the sidelines or stare at the skylines. I want to be free. And so many years walking through this early, large organizational career trajectory, first as an attorney and then later as an executive, I would imagine myself as this group, as the male third member of this group, Mel and Kim, right, staring at the skylines, on the sidelines, wanting to be free. Because even though I had power and money, all of these sorts of things that are traditional markers of professional success, I felt like I was living on the sidelines my own life. I felt like I was a bystander. It's no way to live. Life goes by quick. I was talking about 9/11 earlier to someone. And, I was a couple of blocks away from it when the World Trade Center went down. And there were people that went to work that day thinking, oh, I've got tomorrow or the day after or a year from now to do whatever I want to do, or to finish marking off my calendar towards retirement. And they were thinking that as they were walking in those buildings and taking those elevators up to the top. And then the next thing you know, they were jumping out of a window 100 floors to their death.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I think that moment in particular, and even some of what we're experiencing right now in the world and in the last couple of years, have been moments where many of us have recognized that bystander role that we've been playing, of just watching our lives go by and knowing that we need to make a change. We've seen the great resignation, as it's been called, and, a lot of people making those shifts. When was it that you decided to make the shift from attorney into what you're doing now? Was it a clean shift? Was it something that kind of took time, and why? What was the biggest reason you wanted to make that change?
So, Jessica, I'm going to share something with you. It's very personal, and that it's painful for me to talk about, although it happened over a decade ago. And so, but I feel it's important to share.
Sure.
And share honestly, because people need to hear it. So I mentioned earlier that I worked for the city of New York and various government agencies for close to 20 years. And I was in my final job iteration, the second in command of a major government agency that brought in a very significant amount of tax revenue. And I was so proud of myself. My office actually was bigger than my own apartment.
Mhm.
And I had this stunning view of a downtown park in Manhattan. And I had a closet in this office. Like I felt like I was really fancy people. And things are going well. I had just received a merit raise from my boss that I had not asked for. And the reason why I was so surprised to get it was that it was the middle of the Great Recession. So I assumed no one would be getting any merit raises, yet still I got one. So at least on day one, she was happy with my performance. But then a few days later, she called me into her office one morning abruptly and said, I just want to talk to you about some things. And so she talked about this and she talked about that. And in the middle of that conversation, she said, sometimes, Scott, I feel like you are trying to keep me at arm's length in my own agency. And I don't like that. Now, I had, Jessica, never wanted to be anything other than a good support to her and her agenda. And of course, to serve the taxpayers of the city of New York, who were my ultimate bosses.
Right.
But for whatever reason, she didn't see it that way. And I had been around long enough to know that a nearly 20-year career had just ended. And actually, by mutual agreement, within 60 days, I think, I was out the door. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it was the tail end of the Great Recession, and the newspapers were full of something called unemployment porn, which were stories of middle-aged, even though I'm only 26, middle-aged executives just like me, usually male, who were out of work and could not only not find work, but were threatening to become permanently unemployed. And I was terrified. So I went to a career counselor who said, Scott, you're going to get a job in no time at all, probably 3 months. Didn't happen. And as the months wore on and later a year passed, hundreds of resumes out, nothing. I looked at my bank account. I looked at my future, lack thereof that I saw. And I realized I might become that statistic. And one night, about 3:30 in the morning, I woke up and I thought about all of this. And I couldn't contain it, Jessica. I just started to cry. My life, I was a failure. And the clatter that I made woke up my husband. And he wiped my tears. He listened to me. He consoled me. And eventually, after a couple of hours out of sheer exhaustion, we went back to sleep. Now, the next morning we woke up, and fortunately, he didn't have to work. I, of course, didn't have to work either. And so,
See how that works out.
yeah. And so he said, why don't we go on a bike ride, Scott? And so we both grabbed our bikes and we put them over our shoulders. We live in a walk-up apartment. We walked down the stairs. And then we opened the door and walked down to the street and took the bicycles off of our shoulders, and then the tires hit the pavement. And in that moment, my husband said, Scott, take a look around. And I did. And I'll never forget it, because the sky was such a crystal blue, and the leaves were such a pure green and the yellow. On my bicycle, it glittered like gold in the sun. Take a look around, he said, because this day will pass. And you'll look back on it and you'll never have it again. You will work and you'll wish for this moment. That conversation, those words, were what got me through that day. And the next day, and the day after that too. I eventually did find work, but I realized, looking at all that beauty, that there were things in my life, Jessica, that I hadn't seen. I had walked around entrepreneurs, small business owners every day, but I didn't know that they existed. I hadn't imagined that as a possibility for myself. And I also thought those that did that were walking on ice all the time. They were perpetually insecure. Whereas I, in a government job, had no risk of that at all. It was a lie. It was a lie that I told myself. And the bicycle in the sun and the ability to see things from a different angle were what opened my mind and my eyes to the necessity of choosing a different path. And so later, when I did find that job, it was with a nonprofit. I realized then I could never let this happen again, ever. Not only that, but my intentions with that boss had been totally misread. And the only way I could control that was to be in control of how I was presenting my own intentions in this world and what I really wanted to do for other people. Entrepreneurship, small business ownership were the ways that I could do that, where I could be me. And that began my journey to professional freedom. And that's a long, hopefully heartfelt, in the way it's taken way to answer your question.
It's a beautiful story, though, because I think sometimes when we talk about breakthroughs, this is the Breakthrough Show Network after all, and we talk about doing things our way, we think that it has to be this lightning bolt moment, that we have to be like pushed off a cliff in order to make big changes or see the changes that we need to make clearly. And for you, it was just a glittery bike in the sun.
It was. I look back at things I could have seen and didn't before that. I will never forget one time I had a meeting at 7 a.m. in the office where I worked. And after that 7 a.m. meeting, I took the elevator down to the first floor and walked out to grab some breakfast. And I went to the sidewalk and then was going to cross the street to go to the deli. And on that sidewalk, on the curb of it, was one of these steel coffee stands where a man sits inside and sells you your morning coffee for 75 cents and maybe a bagel or something. And that morning, I remember looking at that coffee stand, and the man inside, I'll never forget him to this day. He had this big smile on his face as he was handing that coffee cup over to a woman who paid him 75 cents. And Jessica, I felt nothing but hatred and contempt for him. Hatred. How dare he smile? How dare he like his life? How dare he show that to me? That was the place I was in. Imagine if I had seen that bicycle and felt the glitter of that gold a little bit earlier and been able to see that as a window. It's an awful place to feel hatred for someone because they're happy. But sometimes if we're not doing things our way, we're doing them the way of others for reasons that have nothing to do with us because of toxic myths.
Yeah.
That's all we have inside. It's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. I found myself in that place before as well, where you just start to feel that it's just an ugliness inside. Truly. It just bubbles up and not a good feeling at all. And I think that with the even worse feeling in that is when you realize what you're doing and you go, oh my, like who are you? And when did we create this?
How did I become that monster?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that you've gotten into speaking and coaching and all of that now. And was that something that you knew going in right away that you wanted to do? Was it something you had always been interested in, or did someone point it out? How did that look going into that transition? What
an interesting question for this particular podcast. So as I mentioned earlier, I co-owned a manufacturing company for a while. My business partner and I, we each had 50% interest in it, and we grew and scaled and expanded. as you know, particularly we expanded into having locations in 2 cities. That is a very time-consuming, difficult, and stressful process. And I loved it. I was ready to go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15,000 cities. But my business partner, that wasn't the direction that he wanted the company to move in, at least at the pace that I was wanting to move it in. And so we had an amicable agreement to split. And we agreed that he should keep the business because he had historically been a printer. I had just done it as a business venture in a way to have a growth and scaling opportunity. And so we agreed that I would separate and leave, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I resisted calling myself a coach for a long time because, let's just say, the profession of coach could use a few more barriers to entry sometimes. I'll just put it that way. And you can draw your own conclusions, but I think you know exactly what I mean. And so I had to break that down. I knew I had the gift of speaking. I knew that I could be charismatic, and I knew that I wanted to help people. What would that look like? How could I do it? And it wasn't until I began to really think about what is my uniqueness? What does my story, my system of values, and my history bring to the table that differentiate me from anyone else and really push out my unique providential purpose in this world? That I began to understand if all of those things could coalesce into some sort of program that reflected an understanding of the journey that I went through, that other people need to go through, and would enable me to be there for them, that I began to understand that coaching could be something that I do my way.
Yeah, I agree, by the way, going back about the lack of barriers, I think is how you said it sometimes in the coaching world. I'll digress on that one too. So after we talk about that, because listen, I've already been down that rabbit hole a couple times on this network, and it's just interesting. It's interesting, and I take real issue with, as you said, doing things your way is really important. And as we do that, we need to remember that our clients need to do their things their way as well.
Yeah.
We can create a framework for them, right?
Absolutely.
But we still have to take into account the fact that everybody is different. Everybody's a different human being. So it irks me beyond belief to still today see some coaches out there saying, this is the problem. This is the program you need to follow step by step. And there's no wiggle room in there. You just have to copy me. And we see that on social media playing out when all of a sudden, you ever notice that sometimes on social media where you'll see like 5 or 10 different people and their posts look wildly familiar. Like, oh, they must be going through that program.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. A core value of mine is that every single human being matters, and that every single human being has a unique set of skills, experiences, and talents. Not to mention other characteristics like non-negotiables, such as external circumstances in their lives that go into who, what, why, and how their journey can ultimately unfurl. And so I strongly agree with you. If you're going to develop a program in the first place, which I do think many coaches should,
Right.
It should be flexible enough to be customizable to that person. I'm not a big believer in just like you said, just sort of saying, okay, this is my process, walk through it, A, B, C, D, E, and you'll transform into somebody else. Unless you are someone who is that unoriginal, but I don't believe that anyone is really that way. And if you self-identify as completely having absolutely no uniqueness and are just being a robot, then seriously rethink your life.
Yeah.
But not only that, to the extent that we are each truly individuals with unique histories and, like I said, experiences and backgrounds and skills and all of that sort of stuff, to the extent that a framework has value, that framework, and it would be something that we hold ourselves rigidly to, I would say it would be planks that encourage clients to go through the process of discovering who they are, or perhaps, and I'm a big believer in this, committing to a particular set of values. I recently had a client, one of the first exercises that I have people do who work with me is to do a very in-depth values assessment. Who and what are you inside? And there are tools and exercises that we work on with that. And a client recently told me, I realize I've been talking about values and ethics and stuff my whole life. I don't even know what that word means, really. And so she went around and she asked every single person that she spoke to, even the doorman in her apartment building, what do values mean to you? And she got a zillion different answers. And so part of the process for her has not been to just spout off, these are my values, but to say, well, wait, I need to understand what values are before I even begin to attach myself to them. I have another client who, using the same step, rediscovered an interest he had long time had in Aristotelian ethics. And he's beginning to reinvigorate his interest in that and perhaps apply them to his life. So the framework of stepping into a discovery on your terms in your own way may be a programmatic non-negotiable that I can perhaps get on board with. However, the outcomes still have to be individuated.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're sharing about that, because like we were saying, that framework is important, but also, the wiggle room in there for people to be who they are. And part of, as I mentioned, what I love about you is you do things, you are who you are. And I really respect that, because I have felt challenged throughout the majority of my life to feel like I can't be who I am, insert whatever reason here. It's so many different reasons. And more recently, in recent years, when I've just allowed myself to do that, now I feel like I'm still very much a work in progress. It's a moment to moment, I think, decision to be myself. I'm not sure it ever really gets easier for me, but I just have had to be like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to put myself out there. I'm just going to express myself or be who I am, or, take whatever I get being fired back at me. But with you, one of the things I noticed when you started shifting your business into talking a lot about the Greek mythology and things like that. And I was watching, I'm going to 100% transparent with you right now, Scott Mason. I watch out now. I'm sitting back going, I don't understand what the hell he's talking about. Because I got the gist of what you were saying, but then through the stories, I'm like, I really, I didn't do well on this in school. And I said to myself, I feel like he's good. I feel like there's going to be some people that are like me that look at this and go, this is a lot. And I'm confused. But again, it's not the misunderstanding. It's just not knowing the mythology. But then everything turned around when I was on your podcast, and you created that space, and you said, I'm going to need you to come up with a god or a goddess, or a Greek archetype. And I literally left that conversation going, I'm going to be on Scott Mason's show. Holy shit. What? I have to go find it.
What have I done?
What have I done? Exactly. But through that, first of all, I learned that I could,
Yes.
that I'm not stupid. You don't have to be a scholar in order to understand these things. And two, when I listened to that episode back, because I think I just blocked it out while I was doing it, I have no idea what happened, and then I went back afterwards. But when I listened to it back, I was like, you created such a space of safety for me to be able to explore these concepts, which I'm not sure I gave myself the permission to do before. And so, do I look in at what you're doing and think that you're going to lose some people? Absolutely. But I also think that's kind of the point. And that's what so many of us are afraid to do by being who we are.
So it's hard to shut me up, but you did that for a second. Bravo!
Thank you.
Do you mind if I unpack some things in there?
Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, in terms of you being yourself, knowing you, the level of empathy that you bring into the room, the level of warmth, and the unique personality that you have, or persona, or both, that you have developed and put out into the world, and the consistency and the dedication with which you have done it, are to me things that are truly extraordinary. But that ability to make connections and to really be real, and actually to set an expectation that your guest or your friend or whomever you first meet may or may not live up to, is something I will never forget about meeting you. Never. And I remember leaving that conversation and saying, this is someone I need to keep in touch with. And so, to the extent that being yourself is and can be and has been a struggle, and people may or may not feel comfortable with someone that's putting that out the way that you do right from the beginning, but it has also created something special within me. And it had an impact on me. And it even got me at the time thinking, am I doing this to people? What she's saying she doesn't want to have done. Are there times when I do that? And if I am doing it, is it for a doggone good reason? Because if not, right, that's something from Jessica being herself that I've learned and need to reflect on and integrate into my own personality. And one thing that I hope that I've done is hold up that part of the bargain that you implicitly put out there by being yourself. So that's point number one. Never forget that.
Thank you.
Number two, thank you. One thing that I did not expect when I went down this road was the extent to which what I was putting out would be divisive. And it has been divisive in two main ways. One, I've gotten a lot of, your soul is damned to hell. These are false gods. You are propagating stories, that is basically idol worship. The only way that your soul is going to be redeemed is by turning away from this, that, and the other. Okay, whatever. Then there are people that similarly feel like this, like you did. Now, I've had people say, and I tell this again for those who are watching or listening for a reason, because they may face this. I've had people say, what you're putting out there sucks, Scott, and it's getting worse by the day. I have had people say that I don't know what I'm talking about. I have had people say that, all sorts of very nasty things about what I've put out. I can't write, this, that, and the other. And then I've had people that have sent me long, really thought-provoking screeds saying, I was up all night thinking about what you talked about, or a post that you saw, and this is how it's affected me. Or I never thought I would care about Greek gods and goddesses, but here I am reading this every day. And so I have come to embrace that. That's not something that I was expecting. To the extent that you said that there may be an intentionality to this, I will say this. The coaching space, picking up on something that we hinted at a little earlier, but maybe I'll be a little bit more explicit because you create the space. It's full of a lot of raw, what I call pep rally coaching.
Yeah.
Right? I'll say nice things and use mindset language and manifesting and other little words like that that sound good, and you'll feel good, and then I'll get paid. That's okay. Some folks go to the edge of the water because they want to get on a sailboat and just see the sights on the lake. But you're right, that's not my audience. There are others that are looking for deep transformation. Crossing that lake isn't what they're looking for. They want to go to the bottom of the ocean and raise the Titanic. And that is who my program is for. I mentioned earlier that there is a client that I have who used the same exercise that you did, identifying a Greek avatar, who understood that this avatar that he chose was the opposite of so many personality characteristics that he had. And he's been writing stories about this, about how by beginning to mentally personify this figure inside, he's conquering things that he had been fighting for years against because he wants to be that Olympian. And so for those who are willing to dive in, the rewards are rich. Jessica, garbage in, garbage out is a cliche. You pull out of life what you put in. I'm putting this out because I believe people are smarter than they ever imagined. And they're capable of more than they can imagine if they're willing to put in more than they can imagine.
It's so good. I wanted to ask you about one thing because you mentioned about people saying, that your stuff is garbage or that it doesn't make any sense or that you're going to hell, all of that stuff.
Well, my looks, I've also gotten a lot of stuff about.
I just get on it. Y'all are lucky I don't know you. That's all I'm gonna say. No, but seriously though, I think some of this, it's the part about, going to hell or whatever, that these are you're worshiping other gods. I know that there are people that are very devout in their beliefs out there. I understand that part. But even between that, and then also as we tie in, even just listening to someone else's stories. So like real life stories. So whether we're talking about Greek myths or a personal story, why do you think that so many of us are afraid of stories?
Stories, myths, or just personal stories that we hear about other people have a fundamental power because of two things. First of all, the characters within them are reflections of elements within each of us. And then they are depending, and there's a lot of scholarship out there about this. And so we could actually have a conversation about this topic alone. It would be an entire series of podcast episodes, which we won't, obviously. But they really go as to how people address progress in their life. Because a story always in one way or another represents progress. And so stories allow us to be able to analyze these things from a distance. You can, through the lens of metaphor, hear something that you might not be able to hear personally, and you can process it and you can extract meaning. And of course, as many people have said, and it's a cliche to say at this point, it also burns into your memory more effectively that way for whatever reason, due to the way our brains are constructed. People are afraid of stories, though, because of that exact power, particularly the power that they have to change our own internal narratives. Changing our own internal narratives, changing who we are inside is almost always an existential threat. That's also, by the way, why I feel like there can be this attraction to the pep rally coach, because you get the impression that you are moving towards something that's greater without having to confront the existential issues that are truly keeping you from becoming greater.
Right.
Stories have their power if they can tap into that, but they also create fear because of existential threat.
Well, you know what's interesting about that is that I recognize for some of the time that I was doing mentoring, ultimately, I think that was a big part of why I stopped, because I tend to I don't know what it is. When I am able to tap into that authenticity, I have a way of lovingly triggering people, that like having people think about things that, and I don't even have to say anything, Scott. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm being so nice here. What do you mean? What's the problem? But someone said to me fairly recently, they were like, you trigger me in the best way. And I don't like I don't even know what to say to that. But I think ultimately for me, like one of the reasons why I stopped doing that work as like the core thing that I was doing was because I didn't know what to say when people would start that pushback of like, they wanted that rah-rah, which I can be the cheerleader, but I'm also going to tell you that your cheer sucks and you need to change something.
Exactly. And right, we all need to have a cheerleader, and I agree with the cheerleading being a component of it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So then, but then I just didn't know how to respond to it after that. I was just like, well, this is my job, is to take you to that place where you can see what's going on and make those changes yourself. I've always, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's Reiki or coaching or hosting, I always feel like I'm just the vessel. I am just that to help and go fly, And so I just didn't know how to respond. I didn't know how to be that, to be like, this is what you asked for.
I'll tell you, I have pretty strong feelings about that. And my approach personally, and this may not be for everyone, is to deal with it up front. I actually demand after the first session that the clients write up, and I give them parameters for it, and there are instructions and there's a method and all this sort of stuff. But they basically write an accountability oath. I want that commitment from them that they are truly committed to change. And then they have given me the permission to respond to that. And the person who is committed to this is them. Now, I had a client, by the way, again, Greek mythology as a lens for this may or may not work for everyone, but I had a client who looked up how people dealt with oaths in mythological times and found out that they signed something called a blood oath. And he became so committed to this that he actually signed his accountability oath in blood, just like they did in mythological times. Now that's commitment.
I don't know who, obviously I don't know who that was, but I just have to tell you that, talk about doing things your way. I mean, hello.
I love my clients. That someone would do that speaks so deeply to me. And his commitment to change as the process went on has been indescribable.
I love that too. And I tend to be that person. I was sharing the other day, as we've been manifesting our house selling and this move and everything else, I was like, I couldn't, I'm not a contortionist over here. I couldn't show the people, but like I was wearing my whale leggings because the whale is the symbol of New London, Connecticut. And so I said, I am in manifesting mode. I am wearing my whale, like I am all in. Wearing the whale leggings, signing the name in blood. That is so me, because I feel like I need to energetically feel like I'm either all in or I'm not. I'm always been that way. I'm an all or nothing person, Scott Mason.
Good for you. When it comes to transformation, when it comes to doing things your way, when it comes to living a life authentically, you might as well be. There is a guest I had when I was still recording new episodes of my podcast named Laura Di Benedetto. And she has a book called 6 Steps to Happiness. And during the interview with her, she stated that a very interesting way of thinking about exactly what you were talking about. She's like, look at the cosmic scale. The earth has been here for billions of years. Life has been on it for millions of years. And humans have been on it for hundreds of thousands of years. Your life is maybe 70 to 90 years of that. An unbelievably short time. And by the way,
of sand.
Right. And by the way, we're just talking about Earth. One of however many zillions of planets out there. How much do our lives really matter? And while I believe that as you experience your life, it matters, standing back from a providential or cosmic scale, her point is well taken. And so her conclusion from that is, why not do it your way then? The stakes are actually quite low.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That is good, and really something to think about, because I think we can get caught up. We're very egotistical as humans. Everything is about us, and we always want to be right, and all these different things play into this comment. But in the grand scheme of things, does it? I mean, I think when Shifra was on the show last month and we talked about mattering, I think that personal mattering is something that's really important. But if that mattering to others and mattering in the grand scheme of the world is going to hold us back from experiencing all that life has to offer, then what's the point? What's the point of this life then? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing to think about these things. You always come on the show giving me something to think about.
No, Jessica, I blame you. Because you ask provocative questions, you go deep, you're sincere, and you rise to the occasion. So the gratitude is entirely my way to you. My way to you.
Yeah, I see what you did there. One of the final questions that I've enjoyed asking all of the entrepreneurs that have come on this show is, if someone comes to you and they say, look, I'm in business for myself, not doing that great, but because I feel like I'm being held back. I feel like everyone's doing this in my ear and telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing, and I just feel like I can't do things my way. What would you say to them, Scott Mason?
I'm so glad you asked. Because Greek mythology, as always, has the answer. Anyone that would say that, I would say, let us go on a trip to the Oracle. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I know you know this now, Jessica, the Oracle was a prophetess of the god Apollo who lived in a town called Delphi or Delphi, either pronunciation is okay, in Greece. And for 9 months of the year, she held court basically in this temple, and people, they might have been peasants, they might have been farmers, they might have been kings, would line up at her temple to have a word with her. And if you lined up to her temple and you finally were at the head of the line and could see her, you were allowed to ask one question, and one question only. And she would always give an answer. And that answer wouldn't always make immediate sense, but it was always true. As with every other character in mythology, the Oracle represents our inner voice inside. Part of what I believe we need to do is figure out, by working with a coach or whomever else you want to, what that question is that you're looking to have answered, and then dig deep within the inner Oracle to uncover the treasures that you have within. They might be related to, and I personally believe it's usually a combination of your purpose, your inner truth values, your spiritual, your social, your spiritual orientations, and tie them all together and begin to then work to unjumble them into a narrative that represents a framework for who and what you want to become. But you have to visit the Oracle. You have to ask her the question, and then you have to be prepared to receive before that can happen. But like I said, Jessica, she sits within you.
I love it. I love it. Always, like I said, such wisdom, and really appreciate the way that you present things, and appreciate you opening up, my mind to these myths, these things that, allowed them to hold me back in school. I was like, I don't understand this nonsense.
too.
What's going on? But now, I'm a whole adult, and
Well,
I can learn new things.
now, aren't you going to tell us what this Greek deity was that you identified with? And what was this physical characteristic that the two of you all shared?
Well, it was Mnemosyne, if I'm remembering correctly. I had to think about that. I was like going over 50 different names in my head. Not Zeus, no. Mnemosyne was my Greek avatar, and she had very long hair, which I also have as well. But also she speaks to, that the storytelling and memories, and then also, as you just saw, life happens sometimes, and she had lots of children.
She certainly did.
So, I felt really connected to her, and a lot in common. And I've been digging in a little bit to learn more about her, and really, it was a very similar experience going through that. It's when I've shared before on my shows that I grew up Catholic, and when we go through confirmation, you pick a saint that you want to research and emulate parts of your life around. And I picked two because overachiever, and the one was Saint Cecilia, and the other one was Saint Gregory, and both of them were patron saints of music. But they both had really incredible lives. And so the experience was very similar to that, where I just became very connected, and it was like this up leveling that happened. So, I have you to thank for that. A podcast, and now I'm on the next level. Look at that.
Next thing you know, you'll be on Mount Olympus.
That's it. I will. All the way. I would love for you to share with everybody, Scott, where they can find you. I have your LinkedIn here that they can go to, and I also have purposehighway.com. But tell them where they can find you, how they can work with you, all that good stuff.
So definitely look up my podcast, particularly the episode featuring you, at purposehighway.com. And then I would make sure that you go to the LinkedIn profile that has been put up in the scroll below, S.Scott Mason. S.Scott Mason. And every day I have, and actually you're correct in the scroll, the actual handle when you type it in to LinkedIn is smason1. So look it up either way. Every day I share some sort of Greek myth along with a lesson that ties into everyday life and business. I'm also on Instagram at s.scott_Mason. But you can always find me on any of those social media platforms indirectly through you, Jessica.
Yes, you guys can always message me. Also, when you go to thebreakthroughshow.com, you can click on the button at the top to connect with anybody that's ever been on the show. And Scott has been there for a long time. Like I said, he's a veteran. So he's been on there. You can always connect with him there as well.
Now, I do offer, for anyone who is listening to this show, exclusive only to Jessica Dugas fans. So if you reach out to me through LinkedIn and say that you heard what I put out on the My Way show or on any Project Joy or anything else that Jessica Dugas does, I will happily schedule a half an hour free, no obligation charisma assessment. And we'll look at how you're bringing charisma to the table, and I'll give you some free suggestions about how you can up-level it. Can't hurt as an entrepreneur or a business person to be able to stand out more.
Love it. Absolutely. Agree 100%. 100%. Scott Mason, thank you so much for being here tonight, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I loved it.
Love it. Love it. And I'm going to love even more that I think in less than a month, there will be a hug happening. And we're gonna talk about that soon as well.
There might be some crying too. I'm just gonna pretend it's allergies, so none of y'all heard me say that.
Yeah, exactly. Will be allergies for sure. Thank you, Scott, again for being here. Thank all of you for watching or listening wherever you are in the world tonight. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I want to encourage you to do things your way. And we'll see you again in a couple weeks.